Good Monday morning. As we resume chapter 13 in Revelation, remember we're still inside this parentheses. And last week we talked about the Antichrist being the head of political government. And if you look at verse 2, it says, "And the beast that I saw," so he goes into this descriptor, "was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it, the dragon gave his power and his throne and his great authority." Remember last week when I told you to read Revelation 7? It will dig into this and show you that Daniel prophesied these same characteristics. And so Satan actually gives the Antichrist his power. So this next verse is the moment that that transfer of power is believed by many theologians to occur. So in verse 3 it says, "One of its heads," talking about the Antichrist still, this man who the enemy raises up to be used as the Antichrist in this last generation, seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. What does that mean? The belief of this passage is that the Antichrist will actually suffer a mortal wound. What that is, we're not told. Does somebody rise up and shoot him? I have no idea what that mortal wound would be, but it tells us that that mortal wound is healed. So a mortal wound is something that leads to death. So is he raised from the dead? I don't think Satan can raise from the dead. That's Jesus's job. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. But I think that Satan has been a master mirage dweller and manipulator of things to make them look like something over and over and over again. So that's what I believe we will probably see. But many believe that it is when he is raised from the dead that Satan himself actually indwells the Antichrist. So no longer is the man, is the Antichrist a man acting on the impulse or the direction of Satan, but he is a man actually indwelled and now being now a Satan himself doing the operating and the orchestrating. And it says, "And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast." Can you imagine what kind of adulation this is going to bring to the people that are already have traded the truth for a lie and are walking in deception when they see this one that they're following raised from the dead? It's just going to solidify their belief in him. "And they worshiped the dragon," so that's Satan, so they know that they're worshiping Satan, "for he had given his authority to the beast," so they're worshiping the Antichrist, "and they worship the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast and who can fight against it?'" Now, isn't this what Satan has always been after? Worship? From the very beginning of time? It's what led him to be removed from heaven because he wanted the worship himself. It was what he did to Adam and Eve in the garden. He wanted the worship of man. And so he seduced all of Eden. And now here he has these people willing to follow him because they're living in a time of great tribulation and they're going to be desperate to find somebody that will help them, that they can believe in, because they're completely dismissing the power of God and all the messengers that he sent over and over and over. And he is going to be so seductive and so probably physically attractive and able to produce all these kind of powers and kings are bowing before him and giving them their thrones and authority. So why wouldn't the world be attracted and seduced by him? And then we're told again, like we talked about last week, the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words. And it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. Anytime I read it was allowed in this book of Revelation, my heart again is filled with such gratitude because it reminds me who's in control. Just like now, the enemy may think he is in total control of your life and your circumstances, but do you know what? He is never in control of a believer's life or their circumstances. God is always in control, and he is in control in this moment as well. The beast opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming both his name and his dwelling. So he blasphemed the very name of God, and then he blasphemed heaven. He's not leaving anything out. He even blasphemed those who dwell in heaven. And he was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. Now that is hard as a believer to understand why God would allow saints to be conquered at the hand of the enemy. This is what Barnhouse writes in his book of Revelation. He says, our God has never made a mistake. And I want you to hear this in your own story today. And if he has called upon some to suffer for himself, it is because his hidden purposes demand it. And because he knows that even their terrible suffering, like our lesser suffering, is not worthy to be compared to the glory that will be revealed. Just as the Apostle Paul told us in Romans 8:8. But yet, what he does not have the power to do is he does not have the power to make them bow their knee and worship him. The very thing he's after and desires. And he can only have the authority that God gives him and allows him to have. It says he was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. So who is he given authority over during this time? Only those whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life. Only those who have chosen not to accept the extravagant gift of Jesus' salvation. So if that is you and you're here in this time, he's going to have full authority over you. He's going to have full authority to rule and reign and do whatever he wants to do in your life. And then it says, verse 9, if anyone has an ear, and all of you at the sound of my voice today do, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with a sword must he be slain. This is a call for the endurance of the saints. But this is an interesting passage that those who believe in a pre-tribulation rapture look at as well. When is the last time you remember hearing the words, he who has an ear, let him hear? It's in Revelation 2 and 3 in the letters to the churches. But how was it said there? It says, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the church. But here, it says, he who has an ear, let him hear. And a pre-tribulation rapture belief looks at this as identifying the fact that he's no longer speaking to the actual church because the church is removed. But what we do know in light of this scripture is that God is in control no matter what the enemy thinks. That sometimes suffering comes for a purpose we cannot understand and we don't necessarily have the answer to in this life. But we can trust that God is always working things out for our good and for a purpose higher than any we could ever imagine. And the enemy never gets the last word. 2 Corinthians says God's love gets the first word and his love gets the last word. And that is a message that I'm very grateful for on this Monday morning.